I'm Teisha Bader. Thank you for joining us. An American Tale, the musical, is making its world premiere at the Children's Theatre Company in Minneapolis. It is based on the beloved 1986 animated film, which tells a Jewish immigration story, that of Fable and the Mouskowitz family, with the new musical delving deeper into the Jewish experience and into the immigration communities that were present in New York City in the 19th century. This new musical features book and lyrics by Tony Award-winning playwright Itamar Moses, who we are so thrilled to have join us here in our Times Square studio. Itamar won a Tony for the book of the band's visit. His work also includes the plays Bach at Leipzig, The Four of Us, Completeness, and The Whistleblower, and the musicals Nobody Loves You and Fortress of Solitude. His writing for television includes Boardwalk Empire and The Affair. Welcome, Itamar.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. So I just said delve deeper into these issues. These are some heavy issues, and this is a show commissioned by a children's theater.
Yeah.
Not that it's necessarily just a children's show, but how do you find the balance between giving authenticity to these sometimes weighty issues, but making it sort of kid-friendly, or at least able to be absorbed by children, and not hitting the audience over the head? Go.
You've nailed one of the central questions of working on the piece. The great gift that we had, of course, is that it's an adaptation of this classic animated film from 1986 that already, goes some distance towards answering those questions in its own medium. If you look back at the sort of reviews or the things people wrote about the film when it first came out, there are people who, sort of praise it for its willingness to go to these sort of dark places, trusting that children are actually craving truth. So yeah, in a weird way, it was simply a process of and it's always my process of adaptation, is if something's not broken, you don't have to fix it. So the questions we were wrestling with were more, how do you take something that works as a film, and specifically an animated film, where you have all kinds of freedoms, and then make it work on stage? What are the theatrical metaphors that can replace visual ones? What is theatrical spectacle that can replace what you can do with a cartoon? Because the subject matter was already sort of, pressure tested, right, in the existing original film. So
we have Fable and his family. They're escaping Russia. It's the late 1800s, and his father is warning him about cats, which represent Cossacks or anti-Semites or people. They're being pursued. They're being persecuted, and they have to leave Russia to go to America, where they think there will be no cats. There will be no hate, discrimination. How closely do you look at the cats thing, and do you sort of bring up anti-Semitism in a direct way, or how do you handle that? Yeah, no,
the film begins with the Mouskowitzes celebrating Hanukkah, right? So the Jewishness is sort of right up front and center. And then, yes, the opening action sequence after that involves the village being attacked by Cossack cats. But the cat metaphor in the piece sort of is really broad and flexible, and over the course of the story, cats end up representing, as you said, almost any form of oppression, any form of darkness and exploitation that sort of makes life harder and forces mice to, turn on each other or have divisions between them when they might otherwise be allied. So yeah, they get to America and they find that there aren't no cats in America as they'd been promised, but just a different form of cat operating in a different way.
I want to read a quote that you said in the promotional material for the show. You said, "Looking at this material again through the lens of 2022 reveals the urgent timeliness, and indeed timeliness, of a story about America's fundamental origins as a place people," or in this case, mice, "coming from all over the world seeking a better life, and the imperfection they find, and how things will be better if we all work together." So you talk about not just the Jewish community of immigrants, but a broader picture of who was in New York City and how those communities perhaps interacted?
Yeah, again, it begins with the film, and in the film, the Mouskowitzes arrive, but there's also, sort of an Irish immigrant community, there's an Italian immigrant community. And so we've sort of, preserved a lot of those sort of slices of 1880s New York mouse life that the film depicts, and then included others to sort of fill out the story, fill out the tapestry of New York at the time. There was a huge German immigrant community, there was an African American community, there was Chinatown. These were opportunities both for story and for character and for our designers. We talked about it with our design team. Who doesn't want to see Mouse Chinatown?
Oh, absolutely. And the timeliness. Obviously, immigration is a huge issue. And how much do you sort of touch on that or try and allude to it? It's
a really good question because, like you said at the beginning, it is, it's a show for everyone, just like it was a film for everyone, but it does have like this one target that part of the audience really wants to be children. And children are smart and children get things, but children, adults don't either. Like, who responds to stuff that's really dense and dry and like a lecture? Like, nobody likes it, but especially not kids. So one thing we really tried to embrace and that the film does really well is that it operates as a fable. We used that word a lot when we were doing the adaptation. Does this feel fabulistic? Are we preserving the fable? And what we found is that you can sort of get any issue in as long as it's in that vocabulary. You're not going to get away with like, and here's a giant speech about socioeconomic conditions the way like a labor organizer who was human in the 1880s might have given a speech. But it turns out there's a fairy tale like metaphorical way of treating those kinds of things. The movie already does it. We were just sort of teasing it out theatrically. Yeah,
and I'm interested also, and I don't know if you can give this away, but obviously, so the movie is animated. These are mice. How do you handle that? Are the actors dressed as mice? Is it more of a Lion King thing where they're holding sort of things in front of them that help us to believe that they're mice? How do you?
I don't want to answer it too specifically, but no, this is an important question because there's the costume design question, which is like, how do you get across that these are meant to be mice in a compelling theatrical way, but preserve things like facial expressions, that actors need in order to like get the emotional inner life across from the audience. So that's like a challenge for the costume designer. And then there's also stuff about the scale of the world, right? Which is a fun challenge for the set and props departments. Like, how do we convey that there's this human world lurking above us without violating like the rules of scale as we understand it? Or even with the cats, if you have a mouse next to a cat, in reality, one's much, much bigger. So we're sort of experimenting with things like shadows and puppetry to sort of achieve that kind of thing.
Interesting. And this is going to be a run in Minneapolis. The theater commissioned this work.
Yeah.
Could we see it in New York?
Ideally. We have all kinds of sort of hopes and dreams, right, for the life that a piece like this could have. But for the time being, we're just focused on like getting the show up in Minneapolis and like making it sort of work as well as it possibly can. And then obviously we have designs on like taking it maybe to other regional theaters that have like a theater for young audiences component or program. And then obviously it would be great at some point to bring it to New York. But those steps are all sort of, you got to get the dominoes lined up. Start somewhere.
So as a Jewish writer, Jewish playwright, approaching material like this that does deal with anti-Semitism among other forms of hate and prejudice, how much does that weigh on you personally? Like, do you feel, okay, I have to get this right, I have an obligation, my parents are going to see this. Like, how much does that sort of inform your work?
It's interesting. I think earlier in my career, everything I write is inherently the work of a Jewish writer because that's what I am. But I didn't put explicitly Jewish characters or explicitly Jewish story points into my work very often. I wasn't consciously avoiding it, but I think as I've gotten older and drilled down more into why I'm writing and the way that you're writing hopefully gets more and more personal and vulnerable, those aspects of myself and of my background feel more and more like the way through to a kind of universality. Like there's this weird rule about writing where the more specific and granular you make something, the more universally understandable it turns out to be. And so that's like not a direct answer to your question, but I mean, your antenna for what feels truthful and what doesn't always applies, whether I'm writing about like Jewish material or not. So you really do try to apply that here, but it's more, I don't know, it's less a worry and more an excitement, you know, like, oh, I'm getting to draw from this part of myself, this thing that I take for granted that I'm aware of, you know, what the Hanukkah prayers are, what other prayers are that people might use in different situations, or just like these sort of cultural touchstones. It's just, I just have these things in my toolkit, and then there are these projects like this one where I sort of get to use them. Yeah, and you just know what that feel is. You kind of have that, and I think you're right. As long as you're authentic, it's going to connect with an audience. It's like, you know, seeing any. Well, the band's visit, for example, we have to bring that up because he won a Tony for the band's visit, for the book, which people are always like, what does the book mean? Everything that is spoken by the character, is that fair to say? That's one of the ways of understanding it, that the book in a musical is everything that's not sung. I would say that on a deeper level, it's the structure. It's sort of cracking the way that the different links in the chain of the show sort of connect each to the next. Which is actually happening on the level sort of maybe even beneath the dialogue. So like deciding not to have any dialogue between two songs is kind of also an act of book writing. Interesting. It's sort of like how things work and the sequential. Oh, this isn't my analogy, but I heard someone say once that like the songs in a musical are like a collection of pearls, and the book writer's job is to string them together into a necklace. I love that. Yeah. So I think that show is a great example of a very small story in a way, a very specific story between two groups of people, and yet obviously so universal. I mean, the show was incredibly successful. It's a gorgeous show. I just saw a production of it in Tokyo with an all-Japanese cast. That's amazing. And it seemed to translate to that audience as well. So yeah, that was sort of a really, really stark lesson for me and how universal it's turned out to be. That's incredible. And that was your first Broadway show? It was, yeah. Ever. That's insane. And it's also a really good example, I feel, of a show that is beautiful and very, very intimate at the same time as being entertaining. And like it's not, I heard you, I watched an interview with you were saying it's kind of a quiet show, which it is, but it also is exuberant. And it's really hard to find that balance, I would imagine. And I'm guessing with An American Tail, you also want to find those moments. Yeah, I mean, with American Tail, it's almost the inverse challenge, where, you know, it's this very dramatic situation where you have this young, you know, mouse child separated from his family, lost in a big city and desperate to find them again. That's super high stakes, right, from the beginning. And then Band's Visit is deceptive in its sort of seemingly low stakes that gradually creep up on you and turn out to have. So it's just approaching the same problem from a different direction. Like, how do you keep something like American Tail grounded in enough, like, I don't know, emotional realism, psychological realism, so that it doesn't sort of fly off into, you know, just, you know, too much of a I don't know, madcap, you know, adventure. And like, there's like real emotion here. And it's there in the family and them wanting to be reunited. Yeah. For sure. And the song that everyone knows from the movie Somewhere Out There, yeah. Linda Ronstadt, James Ingram. Yes, very good. Thank you. I knew the Linda Ronstadt had to double check the James Ingram. Yeah. I guess it's not in the show. It is in the show. It is. Okay, because you have new music and lyrics. We do. So yeah, no, this isn't. I'm glad you brought this up because the movie has only 3 or 4 songs in it, which isn't really enough for a full stage musical. So even if we knew from the beginning, even if we kept all of the songs, and we've kept almost all of the ones that are in the movie, we were going to have to write, you know, 8 or 9 or 10 new ones to make it a complete score. So yes, Somewhere Out There remains in the show, and we may even deploy it more often than the movie does. Mm-hmm. It may recur in our show in a way that it doesn't in the movie. I'm not promising anything. But it's possible. Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, it's a beautiful song. It's beautiful. And
I feel like that's kind of the heart of the movie is they're both looking at the same sky, and his family, him, they're separated, and they're the reuniting of the family. And
I mean, it's if you can't beat them, join them, right? If it's somewhere out there's one of those songs where like if we didn't think we could do better, then what were we going to replace it with? So
right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I read something interesting also. So the movie was an Amblin Entertainment production. That's Steven Spielberg's company.
Yeah, Amblin and Universal, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And I read that Steven Spielberg's grandfather's name was Fable, and he dedicated the movie to him or something like that.
And that I think Mouskowitz is a play on Moskowitz, which is also a family name in Spielberg's family. Yeah, I think so.
Has there been any contact with him as far as this production is concerned?
Not directly. I think that he is, he's aware of it, and I think he cares enormously about the movie. And so one of the things that is sort of a question for the show moving forward is that I think he would need to like approve any version of it that's going to like go out there and become the official musical adaptation. So yeah.
Okay, not a big deal. Just
no
need
pressure.
Steven Spielberg's approval.
I hear he's a really nice guy.
It looks like it. It looks like he is.
Yeah.
I want to just ask you a bit about yourself growing up. When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I still don't know. No, I wanted to be a writer from a pretty young age. I was a big reader, which I think a lot of writers are as kids, and I read a ton of like fantasy novels, like Lord of the Rings and Dark is Rising. So my first ambition as a writer was to write fantasy novels, and then theater came a little bit later, maybe end of high school, college. I got more into plays and playwriting. But yeah, I think I've been saying I wanted to be a writer since I was about 10 or 11, and then only decades later did I understand what I'd signed up for.
Wow.
Yeah.
And in your Tony accepting speech, you mentioned your parents.
I did.
And you said how you thanked your father for keeping your mother's anxiety at bay over your choice of career.
Yeah.
So I just wonder how that's panned out, if she's still anxious.
No,
or
I mean, look, I was trying to get some laughs with the speech.
How dare you?
I know, but like all the best jokes, they're based in truth. I think there was a period. It's many years ago now, but early on, probably when I was just coming out of college, grad school. I think like a lot of parents when their kids go into the arts, my mom was concerned, like, okay, but are you going to be able to make a living? How are you going to make a living? And my dad, who was a film professor at Berkeley for many years, and so like, artist adjacent, and sort of helped train a lot of artists by teaching filmmaking and stuff to Berkeley undergraduates, I think was the voice that was telling her, give him a chance. Let's see how it goes. So there was a little truth in that joke in the speech. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You also talk about collaboration and how theater is just one of those places that it's like immediate family.
Yeah.
And the collaborative process is so crucial. I wonder what the process has been so far in this. I know you're heading to Minneapolis soon.
Very soon, yeah.
Talk about that a bit.
It's been good. Yes, theater's inherently collaborative, but on a play, that really collaborative part doesn't start till you begin rehearsals. On a musical, it's completely different, unless you're one of those rare birds who writes book music and lyrics all on your own, like in your room at a keyboard and a laptop. But since I'm not one of those people, every musical I've worked on has involved composers, and sometimes I'm doing lyrics with them, and sometimes they're doing lyrics on their own. So, and every time it's different. It's like any relationship. You have to work at it. Hopefully, you speak the same language and have the right. You need to in a romantic relationship. You need to figure out each other's love languages. In a creative relationship, you need to figure out each other's like creative languages, which is probably an analogous challenge. So I've been working with Alan Schmuckler and Michael Mahler, who are a composing team, and the three of us are doing lyrics together for this, and it's been wonderful. You sort of know right away on a certain level. I remember the first time I had lunch with them, and I was like, oh, this is going to work. Like, we were making each other laugh. It was easy to talk to them. I've thought about it more specifically since, and I feel like there's a great array of personality types among the three of us, where Alan is, an idea a minute and like sort of rapid fire, and Mike sits there quietly for 20 minutes and then says one thing and it's super wise, and I'm like sort of in between the two of them temperamentally, so that helps. But it's just been very, it's been really enjoyable. And our director, Teisha Bader, is brilliant, and I'm really excited to see what she does fully staging it. And so it's been a good one. It's been a real pleasure. And we start rehearsals very soon, yeah.
So lyrics is, something you've done before with the musicals you've done before, not for the band's visit, but so is it sort of, does it give you more freedom that you're doing the book and the lyrics because they kind of bleed into each other? Yeah, I don't know about freedom. It gives you more control. There's two things. I mean, first of all, if you're not doing the lyrics, which is fine, that's been the case on a number of my musicals, but it puts you in a position where you're taking what are often the like emotional peaks or big story moments and turning them completely over to someone else. Ideally, it's someone you trust, and then they do a fantastic job. But there's still a little like yearning in you to be like, oh, I wish I were more directly involved in executing that moment. And then there's something about lyric writing that I just enjoy, like as a puzzle. I love crossword puzzles, and I think people who like writing lyrics and people who like doing crossword puzzles are probably often the same people. There's something about this process of okay, you have to get this idea or story point or emotional exploration across, and you have this much room to do it in, this many syllables, and it has to scan, and they have to rhyme here and here, that I just, like it switches on a part of my brain that I find totally engrossing. No, that's really cool. Yeah, so I love it. I just love the puzzle of it, yeah. That's so great. Yeah. And you were also talking about that thing in musical theater that is the most unnatural thing, people just breaking into song, and how to make it feel natural. That's really hard. It makes no sense. It makes no sense, and it's so easy to make fun of it, and not have it sound like, and you don't want it to sound like, oh, I'm looking through a window and see the garbage man picking up the, So that's a good one. Okay, garbage. Thank you. He stole that. So is there something that kind of like you keep in your mind to sort of test, like, okay, could this really, like, what's your roadmap for that? David Yazbek always talks about how the big rule about musicals is that there are no rules, that like, and I think that's right. I think if you try to apply some sort of general principle every time, you're going to run into trouble. Well, I have to do it this way because this is the way musicals are supposed to work. And so it really is an intuitive process and kind of case by case. It has to answer the question, the person needs a reason to sing in the sense that there is some character need behind it. It could be they're trying to convince someone else to do something. It could be they're stuck because there's some painful emotional thing they haven't dealt with and they have to deal with that thing. It could be anything, but there's some forward momentum for the character that is necessary and that can only be achieved through what they're doing or saying or thinking about or exploring in the song. As long as you do that, you can kind of always get away with it. And it doesn't make sense, but there's a weird way in which we accept it. But if you're not doing that thing, if you're not letting it come out of a really powerful character need, you can feel it because you can feel the audience becoming instantly bored. Because they know a song is going to be 2 to 5 minutes, and the song begins and they don't want it, they are already anticipating 5 minutes of boredom. And it could be the most beautiful song you've ever written with brilliant lyrics, but if the character need isn't there, you're in trouble. So I think that's the rule more than anything. What is your ideal experience that you want people to walk out of the theater from for this particular show? I think there's something really entertaining about the movie and that we've hopefully preserved in the show. I think it's funny. I think it's smart. And then I think that it's ultimately quite moving. Like, I think, first of all, not to spoil the ending, but when we answer the question of whether Fable reunites with his family at the end, there's something really, really moving about how that unfolds. And then there's this larger thing in the movie and in our show
that has to do with a hope for what America could be, that it's always kind of striving towards and never completely reaching, maybe because it's a utopian ideal that like no place can reach, but that's always worth striving for. And there's something about how the show expresses that idea at the end that I find really, really moving. So I hope people are engrossed and worried for what's going to happen to Fable and laughing, and then I hope they're crying at the end and then tell all their friends to see it.
Well, we have the Statue of Liberty, of course, is in the artwork for the show and is the main theme. And we don't have to go spoil anything about that, but clearly there is that ideal, as you mentioned.
Yes, yeah. And if people have seen the film, they'll remember that there's early on we meet a French pigeon building a statue. The art for the show gives you a clue about what statue the French pigeon might be building.
Well, I'm very excited to see this and to, I hope it comes to this area, but I wish you break legs, break tails.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not the first person to say that.
You might be.
Really?
You might be, but you probably won't be the last. You've probably pioneered a joke I'm going to hear a lot.
All right.
Yeah.
Break tails.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
An American Tale the Musical was making its world premiere at the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis, running from April the 25th through June the 18th of 2023. Book and lyrics by Tony Award-winning playwright Itamar Moses. We thank him greatly for being here today, and thank you, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, managing director, Dara Golub, technical manager, Michael Paley, transmissions manager, John McDevitt, and producer, Carol Lilienthal. And thank you for watching JBS.